Good afternoon. I'm Jessie Ryan, Executive Vice President of the Campaign for College Opportunity, a nonprofit whose singular mission is working to ensure that all Californians have an equal opportunity to attend and succeed in college. I'm pleased to welcome you to our lunch break series, the second in our 2022 series of lunch breaks, which is an opportunity for us to hear from some of the state's most fascinating and relevant leaders in higher education. In celebration of Women's History Month, today we are so grateful to thank the Women's Foundation of California for their sponsorship of today's lunch break conversation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the Women's Foundation of California CEO, Serena, an incredible champion and ally in this work, who will introduce a few remarks.
Thanks so much, Jessie. It's wonderful to be here. We have such a long history and partnership with the Campaign for College Opportunities, so it's really our pleasure to support this lunch session, and especially because Marlene Garcia is the featured speaker. Marlene is the board chair of the Women's Foundation of California, so I get to work with her very closely, and we absolutely are just thrilled to support this lunch conversation and the College for Campaign Opportunity Campaign for College Opportunity, and especially Marlene, who is such a champion for students, you all know that, and especially for women. Our Women's Foundation California, we invest in, we train, and we connect community leaders across the state. And so we have grant making, we have a policy institute, which Jessie is an alum of, and we work with partners across the state in our Connect strategy, and this is part of that. So we're really wanting to work in partnership with you, because higher education in particular is so important, especially for everybody, but especially for women who are often held back for issues to do with poverty, for issues to do with access to childcare. And so it's really an opportunity to transform the lives of women through college access and affordability. And Marlene just knows how important these issues are in terms of affordability, access, and pursuing higher education. And these are all issues that are intersectional: college affordability, college access, gender justice. And so it's our pleasure to support this. Thank you for inviting us, and we look forward to working together even more in the future, I hope. Thank you so much.
Beautifully said, Serena, and thank you so much for your longtime partnership. Well, now I'm excited to have the opportunity to introduce our featured lunch break series guest, Marlene Garcia. Marlene is the executive director of the California Student Aid Commission, and she has 25 years of experience working on higher ed policy issues for a variety of government agencies. As a Latina first-generation college graduate, Marlene understands firsthand the power higher education has to transform students' lives and the lives of women and people of color. She also knows the total cost of college is posing real barriers for students who are trying to access their college dreams. As the state's highest ranking financial aid officer, she oversees more than $2.6 billion annually in Cal Grants alone. Marlene is working tirelessly to ensure that more students can reach their dreams by better designing California's financial aid program to meet the needs of today's students. Marlene, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Jessie, and the Campaign for College Opportunity, and Serena for coming out from the Women's Foundation for California. It's a real honor to be here and to be at the virtual lunch table with you, Jessie. This is a real treat.
Thank you, Marlene. Before we get started, we want to see who's in the virtual space. We're going to actually take a very quick survey for those of you who are joining us. If you can just take a moment to let us know your role in the higher education world and what region you're coming from. We're going to give you about 30 seconds to answer these two questions. Again, tell us who you are and where you're joining us from. And we're going to record your responses in real time. Just so you know, after we've recorded this poll, we will be leaving our chat open. And after Marlene and I have our conversation, you'll have an opportunity to ask Marlene some of your most pressing questions related to financial aid. Okay, we're closing that poll. Well, Marlene, I cannot tell you how excited we are to have you joining us today. And as you can see, we have a great number of individuals across the state who have joined us for this important conversation, led by a strong number of higher ed advocates and a good contingency from the Central Valley. I'm just going to jump right in, Marlene. I've had the privilege of knowing you for more than a decade. When I heard that we were going to host this lunch break series with you, I was thrilled to have the opportunity to engage in a deeper conversation about who you are, your vision for creating a more student-centered financial aid system in the state of California, and the work that we can do together collectively to make that vision a reality. But I want to just start with your journey. For those of you who aren't familiar with Marlene, not only is she a champion for women, but she is a first-generation college student, and as a Latina has lived her equity principles. I would love to hear a bit more, Marlene, about how you came to lead the California Student Aid Commission and how your life experience informs the work that you do today.
Thank you so much, Jessie, for that question, because it really is at the heart of the work that I do. I've really come full circle in my life as far as becoming the executive director of the California Student Aid Commission. I never imagined that I would someday be leading this organization, which frankly gave me my start in higher education. But just a little bit, and I should tell you a little bit about me, is that people who know me know that I'm a very strong and persistent woman. My husband and sons will definitely validate that. But I remember when I got my job working for then Speaker Willie L. Brown, my title was principal consultant. So I shared my card with my family and said, I'm a consultant. And one of my younger brothers looked it up in the dictionary and sent it back to me and said, this is what a consultant is. It's people who tell other people what to do. He said, you're the perfect person for that job. So people know that I really like to focus and get things done. But I was really raised with a deep sense of commitment to family and community. My mother used to always say, those who much has been given, much is expected, taken from scripture. And she said to me, says, always use your gifts to build something more enduring than you are. And that was really what her principle was. Use the gifts that you've been given to make a difference in this world. And that's always made an impression on me. My passion has been to open educational opportunities for students from all walks of life, irrespective of where they start their journey. And I know that there are so many brilliant people who come from zip codes that just don't offer opportunities. And it's just not fair, because it doesn't mean that there's a lack of talent. It just means there's a lack of opportunity. Just last week, we witnessed the amazing brilliance of Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson and saw her story and learned about her. But we also observed the sobering exchange that happened that just makes it so difficult for women of color to be admitted to one of the most hallowed institutions in our country, the United States Supreme Court. But as far as my family, neither of my parents graduated from high school. As a matter of fact, they dropped out of school in the 9th grade. And my mother was one of the eldest of 11 children. She immigrated to this country at age 10 from Sonora, Mexico. And she had to drop out of school to help her family support them with their financial needs. She was devastated. She always told me about that decision and how searing it was for her. She was devastated because she loved school. And my father, he dropped out, and he was in and out of the foster youth system, and school just it wasn't relevant to him. He was a student at Garfield High School, and he bumped around for a little while and ended up joining the Navy. I guess my point is that my parents, my mother and my father, are two brilliant people, but they happen to come from zip codes where there was no opportunity and no expectation for them to do more than get a job to survive, basically. It's Women's History Month, and I just can't stop. I have to acknowledge my mother. My mother was my bedrock. She was the one who believed in me. She taught me the value of education really early in life. She used to teach us about the universe using different pieces of fruit to depict planets. And she gave me the confidence to really move forward in life and to dream and to wonder and to pursue and love education. I'm blessed that I'm surrounded by a lot of amazing women, my aunts, my cousins. They come from a very large family and we all support one another. But I also have a dear group of friends that we call ourselves the Csacs. We've been friends for 30 years and we have lifted each other up over the years, and it's really made such a difference in being able to get through those rough times.
I love your story, Marlene, and what I know of you, having been a friend and colleague for as long as I have, is that you really live your principles. I mean, when you talk about making sure that your zip code doesn't determine your destiny, that is the work that you do every day. When you talk about your mother inspiring you to lead and give back, I see that, and I see that in the way you mentor other women. And yet you were leading the California Student Aid Commission at probably one of the most challenging times in history. You know, this global pandemic, the fact that we are seeing students choose to disenroll or to leave colleges at alarming rates, the struggles that students and families have just to survive at this moment in time. I'd like to ask you, given the current realities, what are your top priorities at the California Student Aid Commission?
Well, we have some very clear priorities. And I will say, though, when I started working at the California Student Aid Commission in 2019, this journey has been very different than what I anticipated. I didn't expect within 6 months that we would be dealing with a global pandemic. But what it did is it really sharpened the focus of the very issues that we had been dealing with all along. They just were elevated to the surface. They were uplifted in ways you could not ignore. Yeah. So my priorities at the Student Aid Commission have been informed by my personal experience, but really by what we're seeing in the world today and in California in particular when it comes to educational equity. We are losing students in record numbers. And one of the issues that is a top priority for us that most of you know is to really adopt the Cal Grant Equity Framework. This is a way to draw students back into the system who've given up, whose lives have just been upended, and they are searching for stability and probably an income. We need to have an easy way to assure them that there's money available for them, and the Cal Grant Equity Framework will make a difference for so many students. The second issue or priority is we've got to do better in helping people understand the opportunities of financial aid. We have a new requirement that's going into effect this fall that requires all high school seniors to complete a FAFSA or a California DREAM Act application. They also have the opportunity to opt out if they choose not to complete this application. We need to ensure that they understand the power of this application and they not choose to opt out because they think college isn't for them. We need to get this information out to them now more than ever because they're going to be making intentional decisions about whether or not to complete this FAFSA. And the data shows that if you're a low-income student and you complete the FAFSA, you're 127% more likely to immediately enroll in college. So that's our second priority. A third priority is really making it easier for students to use their FAFSA application to apply for the CalFresh benefit program. This is a critical program that provides critical resources, nutrition resources for students who are struggling with food insecurity. 1 in 3 students in any given month is struggling with food insecurity. And we just completed a report that provides a variety of recommendations on how to expand access to CalFresh, which is all federally funded, and then also how to make it easier for them to transition to that program.
Such critical priorities. And I have to say, Marlene, as the first in my family to go to college, as the daughter of a struggling single mother, I wouldn't be here today without the Cal Grant. I wouldn't be here without the additional assistance that allowed me to maintain my enrollment. But so many students are struggling with the question, do I feed my family or do I go to school? And so these initiatives that you are lifting up and focusing on are the right initiatives at this moment in time. So we're going to get back to the Cal Grant Equity Framework, but I want to stop for a moment to again recognize that this is Women's History Month. And as the chair of the Women's Foundation, you understand the intersectionality of educational equity and women's issues. I want to highlight some statistics about women in higher education that I think are sobering statistics. We know that 54% of all people enrolled in college in California identify as women, and that women hold a majority of representation at the CSU, UC, and community college systems, with Black and Latina women overrepresented within our community college system. 53% of community college students are women, 25% are Latina, 61% of Black women in California's colleges, all systems, are enrolled at a community college. So, what's your reaction to this data? Do any of these numbers surprise you?
Well, no, they don't surprise me. The good news is that more women are going to college. The less positive news is that they are the most vulnerable students that we have in our systems of higher education today. They're concentrated in the community colleges, they're women of color, and oftentimes they're students with dependents, and they're struggling to balance family and school, and they're typically going part-time. I think it's really important for us to understand and support women. And, 60% of all the students on financial aid are women, are females. And this is a critical component of their success in education. But I also think as we reflect on helping more women, especially since so many of them are starting at the community college, we need to really provide them that economic support because they're coming to the colleges for a reason. There is huge economic disparity in terms of equal pay. I mean, the average woman who does similar work as the average white male, for example, earns about 88 cents to the dollar. For Asian women, it's about 76 cents on the dollar. For African American women, it's 59 cents on the dollar. And for Latinas, it's 41.6% on the dollar. It would take Latinas working until they're 110 years old to earn the income that a white male would earn by the time he reaches 60. So we still have a lot of work to do, and we need to close those income disparities that still exist.
Well, so you spoke to some of this, that women are more likely to be the caregivers for their children and their parents, that women are more likely to say that they need to balance being able to go to college with their ability to support their families. So given this reality, given what we also know about the income inequalities, how do we ensure that California community college students and women in particular are receiving their fair share of financial aid?
That's a really important question because so many women, especially low-income women, start at the community colleges. We really need to meet these students where they're at. They're not the traditional 18-year-old students that our whole system is really designed for. And that's been a big part of our mantra in designing the Cal Grant Equity Framework, is that we have to design for today's students. And today's students, the ones who are on financial aid or who need financial aid to succeed, are not traditional. They're older, they have children, they are women of color, and we have to meet them where they're at. So many students at the community colleges don't even know about financial aid. For example, the College Promise Grant, which is available to waive the fees of community college students. Close to 1 million students actually get their fees waived, but only half of those students actually complete a FAFSA or California DREAM Act application. We need to get the information to them to let them know that these financial resources are available. And if they have if they're a student with children under the age of 18, they get a $6,000 supplement to their Cal Grant program, to their Cal Grant award. And a lot of them don't know that. So that's why it's so critical that we meet these students where they are, that we provide them information on college campuses, community colleges in particular, because they're not going to get the information from high school. They've been out of high school for many years. So we're starting this Cash for College program specifically for community college students. And specifically, we're working with Train the Trainer program to train more community college personnel to work with the students who come in not from high school, but from the workplace, and they may not know about the financial aid. So we really have to turn the corner on that issue. And I'm really pleased we're working with the CEOs from the community colleges, the chancellor's office. We all see the data, and it's very concerning. And we know that we're leaving millions of dollars on the table from federal Pell Grant.
So, in our chat board, there are some commenters saying that what you're saying is resonating so deeply. There are so many students that don't know about their financial aid options. They don't understand the availability of financial assistance through the Promise programs. We have to do a better job. But I also want to underscore something you said, Marlene, that I think is so key. We have to design systems with today's student in mind. And what you're talking about doing with the Cal Grant Equity Framework is essentially radically shaking up a status quo and ensuring that students have the financial aid available to them in a way that will meet their needs and be clearly communicated from the onset. So I want to go back to the Cal Grant Equity Framework for a minute. We know that the Cal Grant Equity Framework is perhaps our greatest lever to support students today. The campaign is proud to co-sponsor the Cal Grant Equity Framework. And for those of you who aren't following the components of the Cal Grant Equity Framework, you should know that the reason this is such a transformational step is that it would enable earlier communication and clear communication with students and their families about how much aid they could expect to receive. It would align eligibility with the Cal Grant and the Pell Grant, the federal Pell Grant, so important. And it would address the rising non-tuition expenses, because as we know, if we don't do more to address the total cost of attendance, housing, books, transportation, and food, our students will not enroll, progress, and complete. So I would love to ask you, Marlene, why is the Cal Grant Equity Framework so urgently needed at this moment in time, and how will it serve our most underserved students and women?
Thank you for that question. And thank you for that great summary. The Cal Grant Equity Framework is at a critical juncture. We are in a unique moment where there is no way California can recover and close without closing the equity gaps that exist. And we've seen it front and center within education. We've seen it in health. We've seen it with housing. But for education, we have seen the impact. We have lost hundreds of thousands of students who didn't come back during the pandemic and left college. The only way to draw them back is to assure them that there are resources available and to provide that information in a clear, simple way. So right now there are 8 different kinds of Cal Grant programs. We need to streamline it. And what we're saying is streamline it to 2, Cal Grant for 4-year institutions, Cal Grant for 2-year institutions. We have got to communicate with our students and families that this is the time to train and prepare for that 21st century workplace. It's the only way for California to continue to thrive and succeed. We need the entire communities from up and down the state to build that backbone of the workforce, to really allow us to continue to thrive and be the economic power that we've been. And education and the cost of education is a key part of their thought process in deciding whether it's for them. So this is a critical moment. Students right now are probably thinking about whether college is for them this year or whether they'll come back. But the research shows if they leave, they rarely come back. So we're doubling down in reaching these students. And we really want to convey to them that here's what financial aid is. Here's how you apply, simple eligibility requirements, and here's how much you can get. And by knowing how much you're eligible for, and they find out within 72 hours if they're eligible. I mean, it's really powerful information that they get very soon. And they can make informed financial decisions about their educational future and hopefully graduate with degrees and certificates with little or no debt.
So beautifully said, Marlene. So streamlining the Cal Grant system in a student and family-centered way and making sure that we are making it available and that students are moving towards their college goals without debt. So critical. I want to remind everybody at this time that if you have a question that you would like to ask of Marlene Garcia, we are going to be opening up our Q&A portion of the lunch break conversation in a few minutes. So if you have a burning question, please drop it in the chat and we will get to a few of those questions at the end of our conversation. So Marlene, you mentioned this, but I want to come back to it. You mentioned about the critical nature, the critical role of the Cal Grant in helping to meet the governor's 70% attainment goal, but also in helping to close racial equity gaps. We are not going to close our opportunity gaps in higher education if we're not providing adequate access to financial aid. And so I would love to have you just unpack that a little bit more. Why is adequate financial aid so critical for both keeping students enrolled in college, and how does it help the governor meet that 70% attainment goal and close racial equity gaps?
That is such an important question because that's about all of our futures. That's about our future for the state of California and the country for that matter. I, first of all, applaud the governor and others who've been advocating, including the campaign for the 70% college attainment goal for California. We are California, and we have some of the greatest resources at our disposal, intellectual resources, Silicon Valley, the best colleges and universities in the world. And yet our current college attainment rate is about 38%. So we need to do something to figure out and to focus on a clear goal and make decisions about how we get to that goal. Well, I would argue that we cannot get to that goal unless we adopt the Cal Grant Equity Framework. We have to make it possible for students to afford going to college, whether it's for a 4-year degree, a 2-year degree, or a high-skilled certificate. They need the support. They don't know they can afford it. They don't know that this financial aid is out there. So we need to convey that to them clearly. And then we need to really communicate that this is how much you're eligible for. Right now, the community colleges where the legislature last year did the legislature and the governor took amazing action in the State Budget Act by funding the Community College Entitlement Act. For the first time, community college students are guaranteed, if they have need, that they'll get financial aid. And it's not going to be rationed based on how many years you've been out of high school, how old you are, or what your GPA is. It's based on your need. That was a wonderful investment. However, the program is still pretty much a maze and very, very difficult for first-gen students and their families to navigate. So we're saying, thank you for that historic investment, but let's finish the job. Let's remove the remaining equity barriers that exist, because there are a lot of equity barriers that still exist for 4-year students. And align with the federal Pell Grant, we would be able to have a lookup table where students and families could say, oh, here's my income and here's how many students, children in my family. Oh, this is how much I'd be eligible for. That's powerful. And then, of course, just make it easy to explain. I've been working in this business for a long time, and I still confuse entitlement and competitive, and that shouldn't be the case. We need to design for the audience we're trying to serve. We shouldn't have them have to figure things out. So to me, that is the only way to reach the 70% college attainment goal, and I think we can do it. Between our community colleges and our 4-year institutions, there's no reason why we can't do it, but we got to help students and meet them where they're at.
Well, and Marlene, it seems that our viewers agree. Someone commented that they love the idea of streamlining the Cal Grants to two. We should be simplifying, aligning, streamlining. This is what student-centered financial aid looks like. This is what a modern Cal Grant looks like that works for students, works for the state, and closes racial equity gaps. So I have one more question for you before we do a lightning round question session, which is a fun part of the dialogue, and then open it up to the audience. You had told me years ago, Marlene, that as you assumed this new position as the head of the California Student Aid Commission a couple of years ago, that you hope to have a long career with the California Student Aid Commission before retiring, knowing that your legacy was solidified because you had given your all to serving students. What do you want that legacy to be as the executive director of Csac?
Thank you for that question, Jessie. I really want to reassure students, both traditional age and adult learners, that they can attend college and that we provide financial aid to help them pay. I want them to know that California invests in their future because their success is the state's success. I also want to streamline and demystify financial aid so that average people understand and make good decisions about going to college. And of course, that's the Cal Grant Equity Framework. And then lastly, I just really want to celebrate the courage it takes for low-income students, first-generation students who persist and succeed in college in order to break that cycle of poverty in California. I want to ensure them that irrespective of where you come from in the state, irrespective of the zip code you come from, in California, you're given the chance, the opportunity to really succeed in college. And after all students really want is to have a better life. I'd like to feel that I, along with the campaign, with all of you, have helped give them that chance. And that's what I hope we can accomplish.
That's what we will accomplish together, Marlene. You've sold me on your vision. I'm so grateful for the commitment and dedication that you show every day towards this work. And I believe that working together, we're going to get there. So we're at this last stage before we open it up to our audience questions. It's called the lightning round. I have to tell you, Marlene, people love the lightning round because you don't get to think about your response. You just have to say whatever pops into your head, and we go through a quick set of questions and hopefully get some great insights on who you are. So I'm just going to jump right in, Marlene. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Of course. What's in your Netflix queue?
As of this week, Summer of Soul.
Oh,
it's probably not Netflix. It might be Hulu, but yes, that's the next movie I want to see.
Love it. Gary Hart, our late board member, turned me on to that documentary, and I watched it with my kids recently. Your next vacation destination?
Wow, Cabo San Lucas. My middle son is getting married Memorial Weekend. Super excited.
Proud mother of 3 very successful boys. I love it, Marlene. Your go-to snack?
Lately, trying to get past the COVID-19, apples and a little bit of peanut butter.
Your favorite holiday?
Thanksgiving, giving gratitude.
Your most used emoji?
Heart.
Of course it would be. You're all heart. The last book that you read?
Sonia Sotomayor, My Beloved World.
Oh, such a good one. I love that. And then finally, the most common thought you have right before you go to sleep?
Breathe. I always take deep breaths before I go to bed, and to ask God to protect us all.
Love it. Okay, so we're going to hop into our audience and participant questions. We have lots of congratulations for you and your son, Marlene, in the chat. People are thrilled to hear that you have a destination wedding planned with your son soon. So the first question is from Danette Stewart. She wants to know how we correlate the financial aid systems with UC CSU admissions, ensuring that our resident students have the opportunity to attend college in California and use the funding available to them.
Well, thank you for that question. We actually do work very closely with UC, CSU, and community colleges and coordinate with the financial aid offices. We have the equivalent of, them being on speed dial with us. But we coordinate, and what I think the area where we probably need to coordinate better is when they're given the information about their financial aid awards. In the spring, that's when they get the actual precise amount of funding they would get if they go to a UC or if they go to a CSU or a community college. We like to actually give them an estimate earlier in their journey, because that will help them have confidence that, yes, I am going to get financial aid. And so we coordinate that with the systems of higher ed, so that we are saying this is an estimate, but based on what we know about you, this is what you're likely to receive if you go to a UC, if you go to a CSU, if you go to a community college, or if you go to a private nonprofit. So we do try to coordinate with them. Can we coordinate better? Always. It's a tough job. I mean, here's a kudos to the financial aid officers. They have a really challenging job, especially in the last 2 years. So we really try to work as closely as we can to support them and to make systems easier on our end. We are trying to step up and make it as easy for them to do their jobs, because they're there with the students. And one of the things I've learned from the Women's Foundation, we really like to work with the people closest to the problem are the ones who are in the best position to solve it. So we really listen to the campuses.
That's such a great point. So another question, Governor Newsom proposes a $600 million ongoing investment in growing the middle class scholarship initiative. How does this investment work alongside the Cal Grant equity framework?
Well, we really believe that it's imperative that the Cal Grant equity framework get adopted and work symbiotically with the middle class scholarship. So what's going to happen is it's called the middle class scholarship, and students will get, the goal is to make their college debt free. The funding, the $600 million initial investment, will fund about 24% of that goal. So what they're good, so for in the early years, what you would see is students between 0 EFC all the way to $200,000 a year would get some kind of a grant. And this would only be for UC and CSU students. So the students whose income is above the Cal Grant threshold, they'll get a grant that can offset their fees. For the students who are getting a Cal Grant, based on the way it's currently structured, they would get a supplemental grant that would basically be basic needs, because Cal Grant, especially in the Cal Grant equity framework, will give them their tuition fees. They'll be covered 100%. So the added middle class scholarship supplement would be a grant added on top of the tuition and fees. So the goal is to move students closer to a debt-free college.
Okay, that's really helpful. So we have a couple more questions that I want to get to in this remaining few minutes that we have. One is from Sergio Ochoa Sanchez. He's asking about the outreach that we know is so critical to making sure that students know about the grant resources that are available to them, and communicating in their language and language that they understand. Does the Csac have a Spanish page, or does Csac have a Spanish language page with all these resources and information? And how are you sharing that page and those resources with students and families?
Thank you for that question, Sergio. We do have a page. We actually have a digital component on our website that you can pick the different languages that to get our information on the website in your language. So they can do that. But really what we need to do, because we've got to drive them to the website in the first place. And so we really need to provide different language Cash for College events, PSAs, social media toolkits, and we're doing that. I'm really thrilled that since the pandemic, actually, we have tripled the size of our marketing and outreach department. And they're just such a great team of individuals who really are leaning in and creating those multi-language materials and toolkits to get to families and students. And we're really we're working with PICA, we're working with a lot of organizations to reach parents and to reach them in their language, in their native languages. So that's where our Train the Trainer program comes in, because we identify people in different languages and we train them to be Cash for College line by line advisors in the community. So yes, it's a critical part of our strategy. Is it as expansive as I'd like? No, but we are definitely prioritizing that, and we're increasing it in every way we can.
And Marlene, some of our participants have commented on how much they appreciate the boots on the ground and the partnerships that you're engaging in. It's wonderful to hear, for instance, that you're working with the Parent Institute for Quality Education and that you're trying to figure out ways to, in a culturally sensitive, relevant way, get information into the hands of students and families across the state. We have a question from Sarah Sandhu. She is excited to see that the FAFSA and CADA completion will be a mandate for 12th graders next year. How is Csac prepared for what will likely be a huge influx, we hope, of applications?
Thank you for that question. We are really, really leaning into that question and trying to think outside of the box and different ways we can be creative in supporting the school districts on the ground and supporting partners, community partners to help. One of the things we've learned from districts that already have the requirement, they did it on their own. And this is Valverde School District out in Riverside County, is that it takes an all hands on deck approach. It's not just on the shoulders of the college advisor, which sometimes is one person. It's the whole school leaning in and figuring out how to make this opportunity happen for students. So we are going to be expanding our Cash for College events, again, expanding into the community. We're teaming with community people, including the Mexican consulates up and down the state, because for undocumented students, there's a lot of confusion about if now we're requiring every undocumented student to complete this form, what if the information gets used in ways that they don't want? We're there and working with the consulates to assure them and to build trust with the community that we're partners and that we're holding their information private. Privacy is a key consideration. But one of the things that we're doing in 2 weeks is we're hosting the College Affordability Summit. It's a 2-day virtual half-day event on April 20th and 21st. If maybe someone on my team, if they're on, they can put the link into the chat, but we'll be walking through the new requirements. And here's the most important part. We need to ensure that all students understand that this is important for them to do. Even if they're not sure they're going to college, we do not want to make it easy for them to opt out, because there is an opt-out a provision in the statute. So we need to make sure that they apply, or that counselors say, oh, you're not going to college. Don't worry about it. That's a 110 question form. You don't need to worry about that. We don't want anyone to feel like it's a burden. We are even targeting continuation schools. We don't want them to be left behind, because we hear stories about students who come from continuation, and again, they're in those wrong zip codes, and all of a sudden are written off. We think there's no harm in completing the FAFSA or the California Dream Act. And so we're working with partners like EdTrust West and a lot of others to ensure boots on the ground, supporting the schools, and making sure students and families understand the power of this step they're taking. And again, once they complete a FAFSA, they're much more likely to say, oh, I can't afford college. So that's what we want.
That's wonderful, Marlene. And I just wanted to let folks know that we have dropped the link to the College Affordability Summit in the chat for those of you who are interested in registering and pushing this critical information out with your network. And then final question, Marlene, and I think this is such a good question. What is the greatest challenge that the California Student Aid Commission is facing in operating across 3 complex systems of public higher education? And how can policymakers make Csac's work more equitable and easier for financial aid access?
That's a $1 million question. We ask ourselves that all the time.
Multi-million.
I think actually, I have to say we have a really strong relationship with our segmental partners, and we have a bi-monthly meeting called the Financial Aid Advisory Board, and we call it FAB. And we talk about these issues all the time, and they work with us in developing new programs. I don't know if you realize we've been asked to stand up 3 different new, very different programs this past year, and we work closely with our segmental partners. But what we need at the Student Aid Commission, we really, and this is frankly, I came from Apple before I came to the Student Aid Commission, and one of the really lessons I brought from Apple, it wasn't about technology, the latest and the greatest. It was about thinking about the future, thinking about not where the puck is, but where the puck is going, as Wayne Gretzky would say, and really giving us the staffing and the ability to be more than just program operators, to be people who are envisioning that next need that the students need, to really think more broadly about equity and financial aid, and to bring ideas to the table of here's a way we can structure to reach students who are in our systems today or should be in our systems today. I find that the way state agencies are funded, a lot of times it's program driven, and that's great. We need that. But we also need policy people who are thinking and envisioning the possibilities. I personally have really enjoyed bringing that aspect to the job. It's what I love, and it's hard. But I also have to run an agency. So that part is also pressing on me to make sure that we stand up the middle class scholarship, the UC tuition cohort model, and all the other programs that we're responsible for. So there's a lot to balance. I think that being able to be nimble and respond to change is probably the most critical. And there is no financial aid program that isn't driven by technology. So IT is a huge part of how we redesign and reprogram these financial aid programs for students. So all of that to say is that there's a lot to balance, but I think it's worth every minute of thinking about these issues.
Thank you so much, Marlene. Well, we are going to close out this lunch break with our remarkable keynote guest, Marlene Garcia, by again thanking you for your extraordinary leadership at this extremely difficult moment in time. I think we heard from Marlene that we have to design a financial aid system that meets the students of today, that we're looking at the Cal Grant Equity Framework as perhaps the most critical lever for getting to the governor's college completion goal, their 70% attainment goal, meeting the goals of the compact, including closing racial equity gaps, and meeting the urgent imperative that students have today of just being able to cover the real costs of college necessary to enroll, to progress, and to reach their college dreams. We are so grateful for our partnership with the California Student Aid Commission, for having courageous leaders like Marlene Garcia at the forefront of doing this work. And after today's conversation, we will have a recorded version that you can share with your colleagues as you help spread the word. Marlene, thank you so much for your leadership, for your vision, and for your laser focus on ensuring that more students, in particular women and girls across the state of California, have the opportunity to reach their college dreams.
Thank you so much for having me, Jessie. This has been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Marlene.
And thank you for the leadership and the work that you and the campaign do. We could not do this without you.
We're so fortunate to be working in partnership. Thank you everyone for tuning in today, and thank you for the questions that you posed in the chat. If we didn't get to all of your questions today, please continue the conversation with us after this program has ended. And again, we're grateful to have you as coalition partners in this critical work. Bye.